Hey everyone, welcome to Giving Back AI Education. Today we're going to learn how to use Giving Back API to understand programming fundamentals. And if you are new here, we've been following this curriculum to learn how to use the concepts of API and the introduction to API for programming and artificial intelligence. If you find this resource helpful, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. And without further ado, let's begin the session for today. So this is the curriculum that we've been following. It's the Intro to Programming using APIs and Artificial Intelligence. You can see we are at the Model 2. We are retrieving sample economic data to practice working with the variables, data types, and operators in a real-world context. And we also encourage you to write programs that will be helpful for us to analyze how the data is behaving, or what are the trends and patterns in the data that we retrieve from the API. Okay, so with that note, let's go to our notebook where we have already laid out what we are going to do next. And if you guys have been following, you must already have this notebook where we retrieve the data from the API, right? And for this particular lesson, we are going to use import data. Okay, import data from this URL. So let's go to this section, and I'm going to write a title here. So I will call it Programming Fundamentals. Okay, so this is Programming Fundamentals. Okay, let's run it. It's a markdown, and let me create a cell. This cell will teach you or help you understand what are the variables and the data types. Okay, so what are the variables? So basically you can think of variables as a bucket, right? As a storage container that stores some data, and whenever we need some value, we can call the entire bucket, and you also get the value stored in that memory. Okay, so I want to make it simple. I can show you example here. We store the information retrieved from this command, right? gvapidf.dtypes into a word data type underscore types. And when we call this data type underscore types, we are getting, or we are retrieving the entire data that is stored in this variable, right? In this string. So that is the same concept. So to make it more descriptive, what I can do is, let's say I want to filter a data from our API, right? So let's say what is the value of the data that I have, and this is the data, right? This is the data that we currently have. So what if we convert this to a data frame? So let's say gvapi df equals data. Actually this should be done from Panda, so we can say, we can call pd.dataframe and pass data, right? So this will convert our data, which is in JSON response, into a data frame. Okay, and if you want to see what is inside that data frame, you can call this name and retrieve the values. So this is exactly what the variable is. I know, I mean, there's a much simpler way of explaining variables, but since we are starting with our API and we really wanted to use API to understand the concepts, to understand the fundamentals of programming, I'm trying to stick with what we have been using. Okay, hopefully it's not too much, but yeah, that's the whole idea of variable, right? Variable means something, some some values or some string. You can think of it as a string value that represents some data, and if you call that variable, you can also access the data stored in that variable. Okay, so just the name. There is a lot coming up next. Now let's go to so this is simply a data frame, right? But how do we create another example where we can get a filtered value? Let's say I'm going to call filter data, and I only want to filter a specific value or a specific commodity from this response. So let me call it filter data equals, so since this is coming from gvapi df, then you can access the column. So you have to do GB API TF and GB API TF. Inside that, you can specify the name of the column here. So let me call commodity, right? And you can say if the commodity is equal to, let's say, let me copy this, floor covering of coconut fibers. So this is one of the commodity that Nepal imports, right? So let's write that here. This is actually real data. What you are seeing on the screen is real data, right? It's the actual amount, actual commodity that Nepal imports, and it was from 2066-67 Bikram Samad year, right? So this is real data coming from the Nepal trade portal. Okay, let's run it. So now we have successful filter data, but what is stored inside this variable? Let me create another cell and run here. I can see that it is filtered. Look at that. Instead of getting 100 rows, now I only have one row that gives me information about the floor coverings of coconut fibers, which was exactly what I was looking for. Now, so what is the data? Just to recap, data or what is the so in this example, data is simply, or the filter data is simply a variable that stores data frame, and the filter data is the subset of the original data, right? And just to give you a quick refresher, Python has built-in data types. It has string, some of the common form or some of the common, data types. I believe most of the programming languages have are string, numeric data type, right, integer, float, and it will also have some special data types such as boolean. So they are pretty basic form, but what I wanted to show you here is by doing an example of how we use the concept of variables to make our programming tasks easier, right? Okay, so the next thing is, in the next section we will learn about the operators.